Howdy folks, we're looking at Edge Magazine, issue 21, released in the summer of 1994, June to be exact, and showing us the future of interactive entertainment. And the cover sure is futuristic, with Wipeout being shown, one of the biggest titles for the original PlayStation, made by the British, so Edge will be proud. Let's take a look on the inside. So we have the opening columns about the 3DO and discussing how its sales have been pretty well in Japan actually. But yeah, now the new systems are upon 3DO, and this will probably be the end soon. Of course, as they say at the end, 3DO has yet to play its trump card. Of course, the M2, Trib Hawkins, could have the last laugh. I'm sorry for not being able to get it sharp. So the M2 would be frequently shown in Edge Magazine. The future is almost here. That's what they also always write in the opening column, at least the first couple dozen of Edges. The future is almost here. Yeah, the Edge was mostly about the future. So Wipeout, Fade to Black, the 3DO in pieces, or these are all these different pictures, Polaroids. Hey, it's Miyamoto. Well, the cutting edge is all the news for this month. Hasbro had a VR system being made called the Toaster. Yeah, that was the code name, and it would be made in New Jersey. This was never released, unfortunately. Hasbro being perhaps the biggest toy company in the world. Ultra 64 being released in late 1995, except it wasn't, more like late 1996. And so there's some more support for the M2, but that wouldn't be the case. There's a commercial for the 3DO showing the game Po-Ed, I believe. Looks like a shooting game there. Oh no, that was Demolition Man, and some kind of fighting game. The ECTS, which is the European version of the E3, was just held, I believe, and it's always less interesting than the E3. And just like this one, more of the same. Atari's there, all the big companies are there, but just they're showing the same thing we saw in earlier shows. If you love Zelda, but only have an Amiga 1200 and not a Super Nintendo, you could play Sparris Legacy, which is an obvious ripoff. I looked up reviews online. It turned out to be kind of subpar. So the Sony PlayStation promised to be cheaper than other games because of the CD, but also asking less royalties than Nintendo and Sega. Well, I never found PlayStation games to be much cheaper than the Nintendo 64 games, which would be comparable. Yeah, I think about $20 difference. No, not $20. More like $10 in difference. But yeah, turns out that the royalties would jump from what first would be, I believe, £3 would jump to £9 now. Something about the Saturn catching up. Well, some release titles. A new Intel chip being released, which will be twice as fast. Yeah, between 1995 and 2000, the Intel chips they went mad. They went from about 66 megahertz to 1,000 megahertz. So they kept pumping out new power. You could see some of that in this graph, though it only shows 1995. So Game Expo 95, was this in Japan? It would seem so, showing off a lot of new PlayStation titles. Here are the pictures up close, maybe you'll recognize some of them. but none of them are big titles if you ask me. Is it Wizardry 7? The website for Edge magazine being shown, futurenet.co.uk. They still use that URL. Here's a interesting book. It's called Data Trash. I wouldn't bother reading it, but it's about how the future will become a dystopia because of virtual reality. And considering how Facebook and other games on our computers are more or less addicting us, some of it might become true. I'm not afraid that it'll become this far, but I kind of like the idea that it was already proposed in 1995. So some of the letters, people saying, hey, you might as well just get a 3DO for, I keep wanting to say track and field, but no, it was Need for Speed. Let's see. Yeah, there's some talk about why didn't you look at System Shock? And Edge should have reviewed System Shock because it was a very good role-playing game at the time. Of course, the prequel to System Shock 2, which was even better. And Edge says, yeah, it's a shame we had deadlines, we couldn't get around to doing that. Atari 2600 games on your PC. And a lot of nitpicking from readers saying, yeah, your information is not correct. Well, I think it was close enough. Primordial Ooze. Okay. The previews. Hey, here's Wipeout. Big game, fantastic music, really cool atmosphere. This was made after the original F-Zero. Same premise, the future, also dystopian, I believe. At least lots of commercials. And you have these hoverboards of sort that go very fast. And a very good chance of you dying in these races. In Wipeout you have weapons. But yeah, Wipeout totally changed our notion of futuristic racing games by itself. Played really fast. And it's never been really improved upon. I mean, F-Zero GX looked a lot like Wipeout. And other than that, there are no other futuristic racing games I would recommend. And Psygnosis also, soon enough, would be releasing Demolition Derby, here still called Demolition Derby. And this is a racing game where you try to knock out other cars. Kind of like Carmageddon, but without the people walking around. I preferred Carmageddon because of the big levels. Is this a modem for Saturn? No, I think it's a developing kit. How expensive are they? We see a price? Nah, can't seem to find it. Okay, Crossfire, the French company. Apparently they made Flashback, I didn't know that. And here's the spiritual successor to that called Fade to Black. Here still called Crossfire. And this is made by the people who made Little Big Adventure, I believe. And Alone in the Dark? Maybe not. I get all those French companies confused. So, yeah. Fade to Black. I believe it was a good game. Starfighter 3000 for the 3DO. Also came out for the PlayStation. And it was considered bad because of its horrible controls. Slam and Jam was one of the... Well, there were multiple basketball games with this perspective coming from behind the basket. I never liked this perspective, so I'd never given these games much of a chance. I believe there was a version called Run and Gun. And they changed the name to Pick and Roll or something on the Super Nintendo. Blade Force, released for the 3DO. Let me look again. Oh yeah, this game, I don't think was released. Maybe it was. It looked fantastic, but I never was able to find a market. Maybe we'll get a review later on. I feel like it wasn't released. So would have been one of the best looking games on the 3DO if it had been released. It's a flying shooting game, by the way, with the guy with the helicopter in the back. And here's Boxer's Road. Edge. This is the third time Edge is showing this game, but I tried to look up this game. and I could hardly find anything about it. It was released, but it seems to be a pretty generic boxing game with not so beautiful looking polygons. So yeah, first round of boxing games for the PlayStation. Gunnar's Heaven. Now this game got bad reviews later on in other magazines. It's kind of like Gunstar Heroes. It's cartoony and action-packed, but it didn't play as well, and there was no co-op. So this game for the PlayStation has been forgotten with time. Another game forgotten with time is The Ring Cycle. Yes, indeed, based on Wagner's... I'm bad at German, so I'm not going to try to pronunciate that. Spiritual successor to Lords of Midnight, which was a humongous game back in the time, but this game is full of bugs apparently, and just doesn't seem very finished. So Mike Singleton didn't get any points for this. He'll always be remembered for making games by himself for the older computers, but this game, unfortunately, didn't rock the world. Here's Highlander for the Jaguar CD. A game, we're seeing a lot of bad games being previewed. Another lackluster game with very good full motion video apparently, but not much to do. A pretty barren role-playing game and interesting, but probably the best role-playing game for the Jaguar because it was probably the only one. So Highlander, based on the cartoon series. Okay, so you want to play... Oh, here, for £3,000 you could develop games on the Saturn. Rayforce. Is this made by the same people who made Raiden? Kind of looks like it. It's Taito. And this would be released for the Saturn. I don't know if it's a very good shooting game. It's not my forte, that genre. There was, of course, Radiant Silvergun for the Saturn. Might be one of the best of all time. Virtua Racing. I didn't know this was actually released for the Saturn. I had to look it up just to be sure. And yes, it has quite a lot of cars. So it was... I don't think it was made by AM1 or AM2, I mean. But I was always told the 32X version of Virtua Racing was the closest to the arcade, but maybe this one's close to the arcade? Who cares? It's Virtua Racing. More 3DO commercials showing us food now with bonbons. It's better than lard, but still. And 3DO, the story so far. So if you want a good history of the 3DO, try to find this issue. It also shows all the different versions. You have the Panasonic version. And the Sanyo version, apparently. With the Sanyo joypad. God, they should have just added an extra button. And the Gold Star 3DO. I believe this is the second most popular. So I didn't bother reading this article. I'm not sure if there's anything new to be read about the 3DO. But of course there's talk of the M2. And let's leave it at that. So next time we'll continue with the reviews in this magazine. Edge Magazine issue 21.